Hey guys, this video is going to be a system and parts overview of the ProFurl C350 system. So we're not going to actually assemble it in this video. I'm going to go over all the parts and review how they go together and explain how the system functions once it's put together. We will be doing a follow-up video that shows the actual assembly, the actual how to put this thing together, including the measurements, and also including how to get the furling system down off your boat and how to put the system back up on the boat once you're done building it. So this is the furling unit in my hands right here, and as a mechanical example, first of all, these are long link plates, so they are adjustable with a cutting tool. So they come over long and you cut them to length depending on what you think you're going to need. They're at their full length right now. So these are fixed with a pin to the boat, and this part of the furler is what spins. So this is what rotates the aluminum foil extrusions that wrap up the sail. This part here stays static, so that's why there's a bearing assembly here. So on to our assembly. We have this laid out. This is a stay that is currently too long. This is a mechanical fitting that we would attach to the stay once we figure out what the length is going to be. In the case of this boat, we actually have to step the mast first to figure out how long the forestay is going to be. What I'm doing right now is I'm removing this clevis pin from this fitting, and this is a critical tidbit for actually almost every roller furler out there, headsail roller furler. This is a threaded eye fitting, and this is a double jaw toggle that's removable. A lot of the times these fittings are we just call it a threaded toggle, but this toggle right here has a pressed pin, so this is not removable. To attach it correctly to a furler, you need to be able to remove this fitting. So I've just done that, and then this is the pin style that ProFurl uses. And so what you're going to end up having is the wire is going to be attached to this fitting right here and passed up inside the furler, and this pin is going to pass, I'll have to show, through all 3 or 4 components here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So through both sides of the link plate, oops, and the toggle, and then these nuts are going to be secured with the washers either side. And this is what's going to pin it to your boat, and this is going to allow full articulation in this direction on this hinge pin here, and this pin will allow articulation this way, so you won't be creating a hard spot. So this is a toggle mechanism for the furler. So this is how the stay is attached to the furling unit itself. And then, like I said, the wire, here's our wire here, but this wire would be passed up and through and come out the top of this furling drum right here and start passing up these, what we call foils or extrusions. Now, what you wouldn't want is for the wire to be wearing away at this soft aluminum here on the inside of the extrusion. And so what you have are these bushings or bearings that attach at every joint connection on this furler. So there's a bottom one that gets placed down here and is secured with a set screw. There's a small hole here that holds it in place, and it's also held in place by these other screws. But these screws have a dual purpose, because this extrusion here actually needs to be, if you look from this side, this extrusion sleeves in there perfectly. It's knurled and shaped to match the profile of the foil extrusion. And then if I rotate this, you'll see there's 2 fastener holes here and actually one hidden on the inside. That's a tricky one. The furling line will often hide that. But this gets inserted down into there, foil into the drum, and then we attach it with the set screws. So that means that whenever this rotates, you can see the plates down there are not rotating. When I turn this, this would, when the drum rotates, it would in turn rotate these foils, and that's what wraps up the sail. Moving up, this right here is the halyard swivel, sometimes called the upper swivel. So it has 2 independently rotating shackles on it, and that is so that you can attach your halyard that pulls the sail up to the upper shackle, and then the head of the sail gets attached to the lower shackle. This rotates when the sail is being furled. This one does not, because it's very important that the halyard doesn't wrap around the foil extrusions. We call that halyard wrap. So I've actually written an article about that on our website. We can put that in the description. but it's a very critical component. And if you ever hoist your sail without this, which is possible because you can literally attach the halyard to the sail and try and furl it, you're going to either damage or break your forestay. So halyard swivel is very important. This gets slid on during the initial assembly phase and needs to be above this right here. This is a feeder for where you feed the head sail in so that it goes into these grooves here easily. So it's a nice flared end. You get your bolt rope or luff tape in there and then hoist it up. So this swivel sits here on the, actually I can put this in place here. So you can see how head of the sail is attached here, halyard is attached here, and we pull the sail up and the sail gets fed into that groove and goes all the way up to the top. And then this sits right near the top, and when the sail is spinning, you can see how, pretend my fingers are the halyard, when everything's rotating, sail wraps up, but the halyard does not. So very, very important and critical feature on all head sail furling systems. So moving up the furler, every one of these foils or extrusions is connected by one of these joiners. The joiner is slid inside and held in place with a pair of set screws. Very, very important that these are Loctited. Many people have experienced this where these screws will slowly back out over time, sometimes to the point that the extrusions actually pull apart, but most of the time you find out when you go to drop your sail and the swivel comes down and it only comes down and just stops because of those screws sticking out. So real pain. So when being assembled, these absolutely need to have plenty of Loctite on them. And then the other feature that we talked about this earlier, you don't want the wire spooling away, spinning away, and wearing away at the aluminum there. These are plastic sleeves or bushings. One gets slid into the joiner first, then the wire gets dropped in, then the sleeve gets slid into place, and now it gets a half a turn. Now if this foil was on the wire, I would then slide this up inside here, and the foil shape is such that this plastic cannot do a 90-degree turn, so it's captive in there. It can't rotate and come out because of this profile shape in here. The foils right here would be slid over the stay right now, and I'm not doing that yet just because we don't have a full length on this for full assembly, but then this plastic would be rotated. So normally these foils would be in place here, and I'm just showing this for demonstrating purposes, and then this joiner would be slid up inside and the screws would be put in to catch that, and then this one would be butted up against it, and those two screws would be set, and then when the foil extrusions are rotating on the wire, they're spinning on this plastic insert. So the stainless steel rigging wire is not coming into contact with the aluminum on the foils. So that's how these come apart. And to get these apart is relatively simple. That's how they would come out. If you're ever taking one of these apart, you would have taken your screws out and slid it apart. So to get these out, once you've separated your foils, you give these plastic inserts a quarter turn. Sometimes get a little stuck in there, fiddly. Slide it out, and then it comes right off. We know now how this goes in here. We're going to work our way up. Every single one of these joints, they're 6 feet long, depending on the unit, but most of them are about 6 feet long. Another one here, and so forth, all the way to the top. And now the top, it gets a little bit different, but not significantly so. Pause for a second. Okay. So at the top of the stay, there are several other components for the furler. This is our toggle, simply with how we're going to be attaching it to the mast, and this is the upper swage fitting. So this is, in this setup, our top extrusion. And so it's clearly too long. It's a lot longer than the stay here. Now there's various ways and tables of measuring these, but honestly, most riggers, we lay the furling system alongside the stay, figure out the bottom attachment point without turnbuckle, 2/3 open for attachment if we have a turnbuckle, or with the stay at length. And then we lay this foil extrusion along the side of the stay here. And I know I need to leave space for this top wrap stop cap, which is unique to ProFurl. I'll explain this in a second, but I need to leave space for this and enough space that this upper bearing, which I'll explain in a second too, can sit. And then I mark this extrusion right here, and I go in the shop and I chop that with a cut-off saw. And so that is just a blank end. So now, how the top works or sits on the stay is, once again, we have one of these joiners that looks a little different, and these plastic sleeves that look exactly the same. The only difference is this one has a machined out slot in the top of it. I'm not sure if you can get that in focus. And this little half moon sea washer that sits in it. And if you can imagine, actually I can show you this. If you imagine this end of the furler doesn't have these two holes here because we've just cut it off to make it shorter, we will insert our plastic bearings again, because they all get them, into the extrusion. And if I just let go now and it was vertical, this would slide down and get lost in the tube there. So this washer right here gets placed right here and slots down there. And then this machine screw, if you look from the top, it's changed the angle here. So here's the bearing in there, and this machine screw then gets run down in there with some Tef gel on it, and it just threads in place and stops that washer from being lost, but it means the upper bearing will stay right there in the top of the foils. So again, without the screw in the place to distract you, when this is rotating, because it spins around the wire, remember the wire never spins. It shouldn't. It's very bad if it is. But this will rotate and the wire will bear on those plastic surfaces and not let the wire wear out the upper foil extrusion. So this is literally just dropped in gravity and this half moon washer hold it in place. Now the final component, we allowed room for this. This is a part that's unique to ProFurl, and this hole right now is far too small. This hole needs to be sized so that it will clamp onto this wire. And so what we do is, for instance, if this is 8mm wire or 5/16 wire, we don't drill a 7mm hole or one size down 1/4 inch hole in there. We take a drill bit of equivalent size, and this comes apart. It splits in half. There's a dividing line here. If I ease all these screws in here, this will come into two pieces. But I just loosen them up enough, and I actually use a fender washer, and I put a fender washer either side of this gap with a split and tighten it back up, then drill my hole the same size as the wire, and then I have one washer short of that whole diameter, or two radiuses, that will allow it to clamp. So that's our trick for doing it, is to put a fender washer or a quarter or a nickel, well, a quarter spare, it's the right thickness. But if you shove a quarter either side of it and then drill your hole the same size as your wire, you get a really clean clamp. And this clamps onto the wire right here, and these two edges act as a catch that if the upper swivel, when you're rotating the sail, if the bearings are binding at all, if the halyard were to try and wrap around the forestay, it would rotate only that far or this far and then stop, because this is clamped to the wire, so that the halyard can't pass around and around and around and create a halyard wrap situation that would be really bad. It's not completely foolproof, but it works pretty well if it's set up correctly. So that is effectively the entire system. So we will slide all our foils on, join them together, make sure the halyard swivel is put in place, assemble the bottom drum, and at that point you're ready to carry this thing outside. And really the process, with a little practice, this is a 45-minute job. So these plastic parts are held in place, and you can see how this, whoops, nice example there. Back it up.